generating the glutes and the hamstrings and like that, right? So go over the form because it's very
okay. So you know, from the seated position, right from the angle of the pelvis, really we want to think about the pelvis being slightly anteriorly tilted. So picture the pelvis sort of coming forwards and down a little bit. So it's fairly close to neutral, right? We don't want this to be totally exaggerated. We're not arching the back, but we do want to think about the tailbone being out behind us. The core is stabilizing, so the core as we're rowing is doing so much work. We're not squeezing it the same way we are if we're doing a crunch, but it's engaged, it's braced. And then we're sitting up nice and tall, the shoulders are down, away from the ears, and we're thinking about kind of slightly squeezing those shoulder blades together, and that helps us engage those lats as well. So we're really opening through the chest and through the back, which is the complete opposite of what we're doing when we're rounded and hunched forward on our desk or now on our smartphones, even if we're spinning, sometimes if we're running, right? And so it's a great exercise to kind of open up and strengthen the opposite muscles that are being taxed when we're sitting. We always want to think about the alignment of the head and the neck. We want the crown of the head to be reaching up towards the ceiling. The neck is relaxed. So we like to say that from the chest up, everything is light and loose. And then from the chest down, everything is working and engaged. 60% of the power in the rowing stroke comes from the legs. 60, yeah. So a lot of people, when they first come in and pick up rowing, they're thinking, oh, I've really got to think about executing that pull. But it's really not the pull. It's really the push, the press of those legs into the foot stretchers. And then the core, as we're sitting up nice and tall, the core is the connection between that leg drive and the handle. So if that core isn't engaged, my leg drive is never going to translate to the handle, right? I mean, it just kind of gets lost in this bowl of jello. But if my core is on and engaged, then the power from the legs transfers right through to that handle, and the arms have to be loose for that to happen. If you're squeezing and if you're holding those arms with lots of tension, power gets lost in there, right? And it doesn't make it to the handle, or only a fraction of it does. So the more relaxed we think about being through the upper body, the more of that leg drive that transfers through. It's sort of it's engaged but loose, right? Engaged but loose. And then we've got 20% coming from the core and the back, and then the remaining 20 coming from arms and shoulders. And the arms and shoulders are really just the finisher, thinking about the acceleration of the handle into the body. At the end of the stroke, we always want to think about swinging the shoulders forward, so that's the hinge of the hips that you touched on. And that's really important because that sets up that body angle for the next catch, which is the position that you drive from. So if we're not finding that hinge forward from the finish, then typically what happens, and I know it's kind of hard to picture if you're just listening, but we want the shoulders to be in front of the hips, because if our shoulders are behind the hips, our center of gravity is away from the legs. When we swing those shoulders up and over, all of a sudden we're compressed and our center of gravity is right up on top of those legs, so that from our catch position, we're getting a lot more power and it's a lot more explosive out of the drive. Cool. So that's sort of our alignment.